Councillor McGregor and Councillor Tate. Councillor Nicholson. Noted, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, if we move on to the minute of the meeting of 10th of May. So are we happy to agree this? Agreed, thank you. And item 4 is the report on dementia-friendly communities, Dumfries and Galloway, and this is a final report. We've been asked to note this final evaluation report here today, and we have with us Rachel Byers, who's prepared to... Oh, sorry, and also Jill Rennie, sorry about that, Jill, who are prepared to speak to this report for the benefit of members.
So I'd just like to start by thanking you for inviting us to come along today to speak to the final report from the Dementia Friendly Communities project, which ran from 2015 to 2018 in March. It finished at the end of the financial year this year. So my name's Rachel Byers, and I was Dementia Friendly Communities locality worker in Annandale and Eskdale. And this is my colleague Jill Rennie, and she was locality worker in Stewartry and then latterly also in Nithsdale. We're both still employed by Alzheimer's Scotland, but we're now working in different roles with the organisation. So when this final summary report was produced, our role within the project had finished. So although we weren't directly involved in the writing of the report, we did deliver the initiative in our respective localities, and we'll endeavour to answer any questions that you might have. I just thought it'd be maybe helpful just to give a really brief summary of the work of the project. So it came about really from a successful bid for funding from the Life Changers Trust, which is an independent charity set up by a big lottery endowment of £50 million. And the work that they do is to improve the lives of two groups of people. One is people living with dementia, and the other is care-experienced young people. So there was a bid submitted by the Dumfries and Galloway Care Steering Group, which is a multi-agency group responsible for the scoping and coordinating of programmes of work across the region to support the implementation of both national and local dementia strategies. The funding was able to fund a team, a Dementia Friendly Communities team. We all worked part-time, but there was a development manager, there were 4 locality workers, 1 regional user and carer involvement worker who was specifically geared towards trying to reach harder to reach groups. There were 2 activity coordinators, and we had some admin support. And the key aim of the initiative was that regardless of where a person with dementia lives in Dumfries and Galloway, they say that they live in an enabling and supportive community and that they feel valued and understood. So the work of the project over the period, we started with a period of consultation, like following the principles of nothing about us without us. You know, the voices of people with dementia and their carers were at the start and heart of the process. So we consulted with people, you know, in their own homes about, okay, what makes it good for you in your community? What are you still able to do? What are you having difficulties with? And this certainly helped establish priorities for action for us. Like, partnership working was really crucial. We were all lone workers in each locality, really, and the success of the project was down to establishing good partners in each locality. And we're able to engage widely, and we had a broad range of partners, and we built strong, sustainable partnerships with 144 different partnerships really established. We did quite a lot around raising awareness, particularly around specific periods in the year, like Dementia Awareness Week, World Alzheimer's Day. We tried to endeavour to get coverage where we could in the local press and in the radio to ensure, you know, the message was spread as widely as possible. I think the real crux of the project was about trying to build a community of support for people with the illness. And we did that by delivering what we call Dementia Friends sessions. So these were hour-long awareness sessions, which the people that attend gain a deeper understanding of the illness and also the impact it has on people's everyday lives. You know, for their everyday skills, their thinking, their understanding, their reasoning, their behaviour. But an important part of the session was highlighting the small things that everybody can do to help people living with the illness. And at the end of the session, everybody makes a call to action, which is a bit of a personal pledge. Okay, what can I do differently in my day-to-day to help anybody that I might know or meet? And over the period, across the region, we delivered 285 sessions with over 3,000 people, children through, and adults attending these sessions and becoming dementia friends. Another big part of the initiative was supporting businesses to become more dementia friendly. So we had over 80 shops, businesses, schools or organisations that took steps towards doing this. Often these partnerships led on to other positive developments. So certainly groups might go on and do fundraising for us because of the contact we'd had, or we were able to get additional financial awards as a result of the work that we were doing. We had quite a lot of in-kind contributions, so people providing venues for activities or for us to run sessions. And some new groups developed, like the quite recently developed dementia-friendly retired farming group, all developed as a result of the project. Community activities was another big part of the initiative, and we had 20 different community groups running across the region for people with the illness and their carers. Because we were all sort of lone workers really in each locality, we developed dementia-friendly community locality forums to help support us in the work that we did. So these were made up of representatives from the local communities who were all committed to making a difference. So you might have a health representative, a social work representative, but also business, education, church groups. But also at the heart of it were people with dementia themselves and their carers that would also sit on as equal members on these forums. So their voice was heard, not only at the outset of the project, but all the way through. And it was definitely these forums that I would say that helped, influence the work that we did, help inform and support and advise us as the work went on. So the project came to an end in March this year. So the current situation, I guess, is that, we've got 3,000 more people in Dumfries and Galloway that have got a deeper understanding of the illness. The Dementia Friends initiative, that awareness-raising session, it's like a social action movement. So the more people you reach, hopefully the more change you see. We've got 80 shops, businesses and organisations that are better informed and equipped to support the people that they might meet who are living with the illness. The Dementia Advisor, who's an employee of Alzheimer's Scotland, she will continue to deliver these Dementia Friends sessions, even though the project isn't continuing. And Alzheimer's Scotland will continue to employ the community activities organisers. So a lot of the community groups will also continue. Okay, so that was a brief overview of the work of the sort of 2.5 years of the project. So we're open to questions.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Wood.
I was really to ask, how much of this positive work is going to be sustainable into the future?
Well, Rachel mentioned the farming group, and that was piloted within the community project, and that group is developing to be a standalone group. So it's dementia friendly, and the plan with that group is to have it. It's just about constituted now, so it's going to be a standalone group, and I'm quite involved in running that group.
And I think like the community activities will continue. Some Dementia Friends sessions will still be delivered, but I think we had that luxury of being really proactive. We could go out there and sort of contact, businesses, people that we thought that would really benefit from the session. So now it'll be a bit more, reactive, like us responding to requests rather than being quite surprised.
Just come back in. I also note that you have actually been able to identify other funding sources. Is this something that you're going to continue to build on?
I think as the project came to an end, we really looked hard about trying to secure further funding for the ongoing work of the project, because it feels like it's not a fixed period of work in some ways, like it's open-ended. You could keep going with the work. But it was really difficult to source the sufficient funds. I think we needed about £100,000 to continue the project for another year. And even though we could find like very small pockets of money, bringing enough money together to fund the project, it just wasn't possible, unfortunately.
Councillor Diggy Campbell.
Thanks, Chair. My question kind of follows on from Councillor Wood's question in relation to sustainability of the project, and it's a bit worrying to hear that there's a bit of uncertainty about future funding, because clearly this is a really important project, particularly as we've got an ageing population, and the number of people in Dumfries and Galloway by percentages is a lot higher than most places in Scotland. In your report, you make reference to moving on to deliver on outcomes. Could you maybe speak a wee bit about what those outcomes are and how you would actually measure those going forward?
I suppose it's like we didn't write the report, so we're talking to it, but it wasn't written by us.
Well, I mean, I think the positive thing to take it, and what you need to remember is that Rachel and I were both locality workers. We were not managers. And the positive is that the support we got from large businesses, Tesco, Boots, all the Boots stores in Dumfries and Galloway are now dementia friendly. And the interesting thing from that was that staff members contacted us, so there was a bit of publicity about the project, and I was contacted by a staff member who was almost like a champion within that branch, and they then put me in touch with the regional manager who covers Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway. He was very supportive, and now the whole of Scotland all the Boots are becoming dementia friendly. So I think it was a 2.5-year project. It was a lot to try and cover in 2.5 years. And I think it takes time for things to filter through. And having that local engagement then led to more regional and nationwide involvement. The other point is that it gave us an opportunity to raise awareness, not just about the illness itself, but about where Alzheimer's Scotland can be contacted and all the services that are available. So it was like a platform to publicise to people, because a lot of people are not aware of where we are. The problem with Dumfries and Galloway is that we're very close to the border. So you may have noticed recently Alzheimer's Society are promoting their memory walks on Dumfries and Galloway networks. So we have that kind of confusion sometimes. Local people will maybe raise money for Alzheimer's Society because they see the media information because of the way that the networks are. So that can be a challenge. But I think having raised awareness, we've had quite a lot of involvement, and it's about getting the communities behind you. I mentioned the farming group, and that's a community within a community, but working within our localities. And again, we're working quite closely with the NHS and the community workers there. And it did give us a great opportunity to network with lots of community organisations. So, hopefully that we can build on that.
And actually the businesses themselves sort of taking things forward. So like with Tesco's having done the Dementia Friends session, then we started to discuss the possibility of a relaxed lane in store, like at certain periods during the week. So Annan started, but then Lockerbie and Castle Douglas also have relaxed lanes now. And they're certainly, like I know the one in Annan is still running. And even though the project finished in March, they put something in the press. Tesco's themselves put a wee article during Dementia Awareness Week in June. And certainly for me, that was really encouraging that they'd taken ownership from that. And we weren't, pushing them to do that anymore, but they were still sort of, committing to that promise, really.
Just a final point. So you can see sort of practical examples that attitudes are changing and it's been embedded in sort of businesses and their practices, and people are becoming much more aware. Yeah, okay, great. Thanks very much.
I'll let Heather come in just now, and I think Councillor Murray, you're probably wanting in the same point, and then I'll take Councillor Bell after that.
It was just to say that this is a really positive piece of work, which is part of an overall plan around working with dementia. So I suppose it's important to see it in that context, and that it's really good to hear from Rachel that actually Alzheimer's are continuing to fund some of those posts, and they will sit alongside some of the other services like the Ideas team that sits within the NHS that social work has a social worker in as well. And you know, dementia is seen as one of the really key areas of work if you look at the health and social care plan, and this has given it a real boost. You know, it's almost like set some of the foundations for some of this work, and we would want to then be looking through the partnership to say, how would we build on this? Because it's been really valuable, so you know, you wouldn't want to see it in any way lost. But it actually sits alongside and complements the other work that's there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Murray?
Yes, just really as a matter of interest, what is it that these businesses have actually done to make themselves more dementia friendly? I'm not sure that I know what a relaxed lane is in Tesco's. I never feel particularly relaxed in Tesco's, so I'm not quite sure what it is.
I guess that's the whole point of creating a relaxed lane. So, and it isn't just for people with dementia, it's for anybody that just wants a relaxed, unhurried experience. So that's how it's promoted. So
yeah, but what do they do? I mean, what changes have Boots made to make themselves more dementia friendly, or Tesco's? What have they actually done that's helped people with dementia? So practically,
they sign a pledge to make a commitment that they're going to, you know, work towards becoming more dementia friendly. They make a commitment to ensure that all their awareness amongst the staff, you know, so the staff do the Dementia Friends session, either face-to-face ideally or online if they can't do that. They agree to disseminate information about the illness to all their staff. They agree to either information or even an environmental audit. So somebody walks through the premises and we sort of have a discussion about how they could make the premises more dementia friendly. And they make a commitment to keeping a link with us as an organisation. So they get leaflets of ours to promote. They know that they can come back to us if they have any particular concerns about anybody that they might meet, and they'll promote our activities. So there's a 4-tier sort of pledge.
Yeah, I just wondered if there was ways in which, you know, premises could be laid out differently that help people with dementia, that made people feel less confused when they went in.
Yeah, absolutely.
That type of thing.
And we would certainly have those sort of discussions, I think, and we could highlight things that they might change if they were going to do a refit in future, but it was probably more about just moving signage, you know, putting it in, you know, people's eye line, improving the contrast between the signage so it doesn't get lost in if the background is very similar to the colour of the sign, the contrast isn't as good, people won't see it as well. So often it was simple changes. Maybe putting a navigational arrow on a sign so it's really clear what that sign means and where the direction is. So I think people made simple changes. We could suggest the bigger changes, but whether they do or not. But at least they know where to come back to. Do you know if they want more information?
And then Boots, and you mentioned Boots in particular, the staff then following on from the Dementia Friends session were able to signpost people to certain agencies, because during the Dementia Friends sessions they would bring up experiences they have with a customer, and for them they didn't know how to support this person best. So throughout the Dementia Friends session we discussed it, and I would give them the details of Alzheimer's Scotland or social work services, or and again just giving them that information and giving them the confidence that they could then know where to signpost someone, or so the staff were already quite aware, especially within the chemists, because how often do people go into a chemist for the prescriptions, for example? So they already had an awareness, but it was just giving them that confidence to carry things forward and be more supportive to people living with dementia in the community.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a couple. One of the first questions, obviously, reading into the number of services, numbers of groups you're working with, and obviously Parkinson's UK is not mentioned. And obviously, people have got relations have got Parkinson's, and sometimes it can lead to dementia in the latter stages. Are you working with Parkinson's UK?
I'm not aware that we have any sort of direct links. As I say, I suppose we were delivering the project. We weren't at that management tier of being at development meetings, I suppose.
Okay, well, we'll go on with the second question. Obviously, you know, if a number of people have obviously been here or visited someone in a Maggie's Centre for cancer, or obviously there's one possibly coming to Dumfries and Galloway in the future. At the end of the day, a number of these people go in there for respite care, for cancer treatment, waiting and treatment and whatnot. Is there any way we should be having a building for dementia? Because it's quite a very, very important issue. Is a number of people need respite care, they need a friendly environment. Is there any way we should be looking for that within this locality?
Well, we have a resource centre where people can go for information, and it does provide a day service.
A wee bit more on the resource centre.
If we could maybe bring in Heather at this time, because she maybe have something to say about dementia-friendly environments, for example.
Yeah, there's a lot of work out with sort of the work in the report that's going on around dementia-friendly environments in terms of our care homes, in terms of our day services. We haven't specifically looked at a dementia centre, as it were, and again, in a rural area like this, that's quite difficult to do. So there would be things that you'd want to think about around how you develop that and deliver that. But I know that sort of the approach we've taken at the minute is that the IDEAS team in particular actually goes into centres to work with people and looks at how you can ensure that the environment that people with dementia are part of, alongside other people, that they can continue to be integrated in that way. So there are pros and cons, as it were, in terms of having a specific centre. But as I say, we're doing as much as we can in terms of the current resources that we've got, really.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my question's been touched on, but I'll just maybe try and word it in a different way. Probably you, Heather, probably being pointed out as being the report author. Because we see a project like this, it comes forward and you think, wow, this is good. Dementia, Dougie Campbell's already alluded to the fact that it's a growing problem, you could say, in Dumfries and Galloway in particular, and I think that's absolutely right, that's recognised. So if we're looking at creating dementia-friendly communities, that's what this is about, and that's what it seems to have done. If whether it's the council, NHS, whoever it may be, whatever funders, because obviously it's been pointed out that there's a funding problem in regards to keeping a project that's rolling on, if it's important, how do we actually measure the impact that this project has done? I think it's important that we do understand how we actually measure that impact, how important and how relevant that is to the authorities who would potentially fund this.
Yeah, I would expect that although the project itself is finished, in terms of the outcomes we'd want to achieve, those are ongoing. And therefore, as part of the health and social care locality plans, looking at what impact any of the work that goes on in a locality has is really important to try and get a sense of what that impact is. And it's the joining up of those various things that will allow us to do that. Now, measuring individual impacts is something that challenges us at the minute in terms of how we find a way to do that. But measuring impacts overall, so we would look probably at whether there's any correlation between, for example, people with dementia and the time they spend maybe in hospital or, in day services, the respite they receive. So it's about trying to look at the different sort of layers of service that people have and look then at what's going on around the community and whether that's had a full impact. Now, I'm not sure whether this project was set up in order to start to do some of that evaluation, but I would expect the partnership to be looking at it to say this has been a really valuable piece of work. We need to ensure that we understand the impact it has had up to date, but equally to understand the outcomes we want to achieve in the future and how we would evaluate those in terms of looking to say how far have we embedded dementia-friendly communities already, and therefore how much more work would we look to the localities through the health and social care plan to take that piece of work forward and to look at how that's evaluated. And that's certainly something I can take back to my colleagues in the partnership to say we'd be really interested to understand better perhaps that the evaluative end of it, because that's really key to taking things forward and doing it in a really effective way.
Councillor Murray, I presume you don't have a separate question. Right, okay. I'm sort of... Yeah, so Councillor Maitland, please.
Thank you very much indeed for your report. In the middle of the report here, you mentioned that you did encounter people and organisations who were unwilling to talk to you or to share information. And I wonder if you could expand a little on that as to how perhaps we should be helping with this particular problem.
I think for some organisations, they would, if they needed to get information, approval from head office, Glasgow, Edinburgh, wherever that might be, then that was a stumbling block often. Some businesses would agree to our input, but they would only support it if the staff went in their own time. Okay, so they wouldn't allow for any training to happen within staff time. So that was another stumbling block. And some businesses just said no, they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't have the capacity to be able to, support the initiative. And I think to begin with, we did try work around that as much as we could. We offered online sessions rather than face-to-face sessions, which can be completed much more quickly. So we did try adapt things as much as we could. But some people, we weren't able to work with because we weren't able to find a compromise.
Chairman, it was more the information sharing, because that's dear to, I think, our hearts in audit and risk in particular. And I was just wondering whether you could help us with what the information sharing problems were. You specifically say they were unwilling or unable to share information. So I wonder if you could help me with that, please.
It's a bit hard to say.
Okay, I think there's probably two issues there. One is about people unwilling to perhaps be involved and share, which would be about the culture change that this represents, so that this is the bit about a cultural change that we need to move over time. I suspect in this instance, the information sharing is not necessarily about the specific data, but might be more about sort of what that service does or what's going on. We'd have to go back and check whether or not that was specific to, and because absolutely I would agree with you, we'd want to understand if that had been an issue. So I can certainly go back via health and check that to say, could we just unpick that a little bit? And if there was an issue with actual data sharing in terms of information, then actually to let us know, because we would be interested in that given sort of the other work that we're doing.
So there's a couple of things have come out of that, which is just about how the impact of any changes relating to this would be measured and reported back to, for example, area committee. So what sort of metrics would be used to at a locality level for reporting the impact of any changes, for example, or the improvements? There's also a little bit there about how do we have dementia-friendly development, whether that's a place or whether that's in developments that do come forward where there's an element of being dementia-friendly in terms of an environment. So that could be something to do with planning and the private sector who are developers. And there's also, well, I'm just wondering if you could maybe capture how this committee could convey those views to either through partnership officers or at the appropriate level to ensure that we're getting the information and the input. Heather, if you'd be able to touch on
that. Yes, I'm more than happy to take that back to one of the senior members of the partnership who's been involved in this piece of work, for us to have a conversation that begins to unpick some of those issues that have been raised by members, and then to possibly bring back some sort of briefing for you in terms of the responses, if that would be helpful. Yeah.
Councillor Wood.
Can I also ask, as chair of Swestrans, if it's possible that we could enter into discussion with you as well? Because I think it's extremely important that we fully understand the whole impact of Alzheimer's within transport. Because I noticed that you have spoken to the bus, and there's no mention of trains, and I just wonder if we need to have that discussion.
With that, are members happy to note this report? Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Jill and Rachel for their input today. That was very helpful. So item 5 now is turning legislation into practice together. First report on corporate parenting activity in Scotland. We've got Stephen Morgan here to speak to this, and members, obviously you'll have read through the report and will be full of enthusiastic questions for Stephen. So I'll hand it over to yourselves. Is there anybody who would like to ask anything first? Councillor McClelland.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to refer to page 72
I fully appreciate that this is a report from the government, it's a government paper, and the local authority in question here that's being reflected is Glasgow City Council. The three questions on the theme to the report are: where were you, where are you now, and where are you going? I'm just wondering if it would be possible at some point to establish in Dumfries and Galloway Council where were we pre-2014, where are we now, and where are we going? And just to add a bit more flesh to that, as an elected member, I have absolutely no idea what my responsibilities are as a corporate parent, if I have any at all. I'm assuming from reading this report that I probably do have responsibilities. So I'd maybe like some clarity on that going forward. I don't expect that to be resolved here today, but I'd like to see something put in place that allows all elected members to understand our responsibilities within corporate parenting and where we actually stand as a council.
Good point, well made. Stephen, do you want to respond to that?
The green button was on. Sorry about that, guys. That's an absolutely excellent point and well made. I think what we've done currently in Dumfries and Galloway is we point through the Children's Service Executive Group, and some of that information clearly hasn't got to yourself. So I think there's two different things that I would like to do with your permission, and that's bring a group of care experienced youngsters, or looked after children, it's the old language, to do a presentation to yourselves about their experience of being care experienced here in Dumfries and Galloway, what barriers they faced, what support they had, and on the back of that I can then do a presentation on what your specific responsibilities are, including what my specific responsibilities would be, and again give you a journey of where we were, where we are. We have all that information, all that data. Quite happy to share that. I think using the care experienced young people really brings this topic to life, and it's a topic that I'm quite energised by, and I think we all need to be, because this is the most vulnerable group of young people in our community, and we've got significant responsibility to try and improve their long-term outcomes. So happy to bring something back. Probably December would be a good reporting time to prepare some of the work and prepare the youngsters to come forward, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a wider element there, which is, I mean, is there a general role? I'm conscious this committee can benefit from that, but is there a wider role for all elected members? Just how do we take that forward?
I think we can look at that in terms of all elected members, all council employees, all police officers, health staff, fire service, skills development Scotland are all key partners locally, and we all do have a responsibility. Some of us have a very significant and narrow responsibility. Some have a very broad oversight. I think for yourselves it's to be aware of who your care experienced youngsters are, aware of who the wider group of looked after children are. And I don't mean the individuals, I mean the demographic of people. So you're aware of the impacts that the policy decisions that you make has on them. So that's the general understanding that you need to have. And then there are lots and lots of really quite what I call dry indicators in the background as to how well we're doing. We tend to number crunch those ourselves and analyse those, and we could bring a summary and analysis back to yourself. So you've got that overview of your very broad responsibility to be aware of who these children, the young people are, what the barriers to them achieving what they need to achieve might be, and what you as councillors can do when you're considering policies that affect them. And that's not just policies that comes to social work committee, it could be wider policies in terms of how we utilise the whole of the budget. I don't know, does that answer the question?
I'm sort of clumsily consulting with my governance officer here to find out what the best way would be to get something, maybe a recommendation within this report to bring a report back to this committee along with the presentation, because that sounds like a good idea. I don't know if members feel the same, but about then how we can understand our role within this committee as our part in the corporate parenting setup, but also if that applies to all members of this council, then surely that should be something we should refresh and reinforce so that all members of the council have access to that knowledge and what the responsibilities are. So it's really just how, that's what I'm sort of rudely doing while you're talking, how that sort of fits together in terms of what we bring back here and what we recommend to take further. So I suppose I'm kind of in the committee's hands really, but from what Stephen's saying, is that kind of where we want to go, and it's just about finding the right mechanism to do that? Yep. Jane, if you want to come in.
Well, it's the levels really, and I think for members to understand all the structures that are in place, as well as how they are actually delivering. Because I mean, I can understand that people don't realise that the Champions Board has membership, elected membership on that, and how that connects up with care experienced young people and all the indicators that are coming through education and obviously social work for care experienced young people, and whether actually we're making any sort of progress at all, and how we then challenge officers and other partner organisations to do their bit. So if all that can come into the into the mix, I think the council has made a very good point that we actually need a refresh.
Sorry, Councillor Murray?
Yes, I mean, the report's interesting, but it's telling us what's happening in Scotland. It's not telling us what's happening in Dumfries and Galloway. And I think it's a very good suggestion that you've made, that you will bring a group of experienced young people so we can have a better handle on what our responsibilities are. But it's not just the council that's responsible, it's actually other public sector agencies. And so I would suggest actually is that this probably should go to the Community Planning Partnership, because it should be discussed by the whole of the, if you like, the public sector in Dumfries and Galloway. There's the responsibilities of the police, the health board and so on as well. So something could be done within the council, but I think actually there should be a report going up to the Community Planning Partnership as well.
Okay, there's definitely something about members here understanding their role within a complex partnership setup and the different reporting mechanisms, because I'm aware that the Champions Board will report as opposed to the Children's Officers Executive Group, is it? There's a strategic executive group, but it doesn't report to here, for example. So, but Councillor Carruthers, if you want to come in.
I thought in the back of what Henry's point, what he made in particular, was that we've got our own personal development plans is one part, but I think another part is we used to have, whether we create a seminar or whether we used to have at the beginning, I forget it was the beginning or the end of social work, I think it was the end actually, different themes, and that would be a good theme probably. We would, once the meeting was finished, we'd just stay back for like half an hour or up to an hour, and we'd go through that particular theme. So this theme could actually be the corporate responsibility of elected members, just singularly and collectively across the council, whether it's a member of the committee or the full council itself. But I think it's a relevant point, because it's quite easy to pick up on. We do annual appraisals at a group setting. We look forward, try and put a structured development plan into place and training and such like. But I think it's it's right, because it's easy to skip, think, well, I don't really need that, or in fact, I'm not even aware of that. So I think it's an important point that he brings up. But there's 2 or 3 different options that we could bring that level of training and experience to ourselves.
So having taken that on board, I suppose if we were asking for a report to come back to here, this is aside from the presentation from the looked after young people from the sort of lived experience sort of thing, but a report that sort of outlines, if you like, what members have raised today in terms of helping us to understand, one, the environment that we're in legislatively in terms of partnership and responsibilities and the reporting mechanisms, and what our role within that is, and what our responsibilities are as a result of that. Obviously that's for this committee, we can ask for that. In terms of the wider points, the information for all members, what their responsibilities are in the form of a seminar or presentation. I don't know what would work best in a way of mixed results of seminars for members, but if that's something that we can maybe either bring back as an option within part of that report that fits the appropriate delegation and governance or whatever, or that we can ask for that now. I'm not really sure how that mechanism exists for us to do, but can I run that by you, Lucy, and see what we're allowed to do?
Just looking through the delegations of the Social Work Committee, that is to lead, one of them is to lead corporate parenting in the council in respect of children in care. So I mean, it would make sense, I think, for it to come back to this committee, but you could always extend the invitation to other members of the council.
Well, it seems it's within our gift, so shall we go ahead on that basis? So a report to come back here along with the presentation from young looked after children, and then we can extend that invitation to all members of the council. We'll give it a go anyway. Right. Councillor Wood.
Within that report, can we also add the mechanisms of celebrating the successes? Because I'm sure these young people are successful in certain fields that they've taken forward.
Stephen, if you want to come in.
Strongly welcome that. And just in terms of a simple statistic, we've currently got 11 care experienced youngsters at higher education at university from Dumfries and Galloway, and that is an absolutely phenomenal achievement for those young people. And you're absolutely right that we need to celebrate that success. So thank you for the wee prompt so I could just get a little bit of the success in there, because there is success as well as the negative side of things. We've got to celebrate that. So absolutely.
Councillor McKee.
The only thing there is the risk of identifying people who might not want to be identified. There's just another couple of issues I'd like to raise. The Champions Board, up until this morning, I didn't think it existed again. I thought it had been forgotten about, but I understand it's now operating. How about us getting a 6-monthly or annual report from the Champions Board, just to keep us in, let us know what's happening, what they're doing, and all that sort of thing. I think that would be beneficial as well. And getting councillors to know about being corporate parents. My concern is that a seminar's not worth it. It's a waste of time. You get 12 or 14 councillors there, you're doing well. I'd like to see, if possible, a report on what we're doing within the council goes to full council, just to let them know what their responsibilities are, what's happening in the area, and what they can do to help, and that type of thing. That's where I come from. Just interested to see what kind of response you get from the other members.
Do you want to add a few words to that, Stephen, there, or thoughts?
If I pick up the first point about the Champions Board, the Champions Board is actually chaired by a care experienced youngster. The vice chair is another care experienced youngster, and they get support from youth services and also from the chief executive as a member of that board. They set their own reporting mechanisms to some degree in terms of what they're comfortable doing. So I can certainly take that request back to them, but I wouldn't want to put any undue pressure on those young people who are leading on that piece of work, because I think it has to come from them and the people who are supporting them to achieve what they can achieve. So that's what I would suggest with that. In relation to the second point about the full council, I think that's the governance question you've just been speaking about. So coming back here and inviting other members in, see how that goes, and if it doesn't work, we can then address it again and see what we might do into the future, perhaps.
Okay. I think we've explored that. Are we happy to go ahead on the basis that we've kind of agreed? So a report comes back here, or if you just want to summarise, just for clarity, Lucy. Thanks.
Okay, in terms of the recommendations, members have been asked to note the content of the Scottish Government's report turning legislation to practice, first report on corporate parenting activity in Scotland 2015 to March 2018, and we consider that's been noted. And with an additional recommendation that members have requested for a report to come back on the members' roles and responsibilities as corporate parents, along with a presentation, and this an invitation would be extended to all members of the council to attend. Would you like to put a timeline on that? It was December was suggested.
Yeah, I think we're suggesting December, and I think there was the other point, which is the roles and responsibilities, but also that would maybe explain the sort of landscape that we're in as well. So it's a complex context, if you like. So it's our roles within that, I suppose. So I think Stephen's probably taken that on board. So on that basis, are we happy to agree and go forward? Yep. Thank you. So next up is external scrutiny of social work services. This is item 6, and we've been asked to note the outcome of the scrutiny activity, which took place between March and July earlier this year, and consider the progress being made. So I'll open this up to members again. Councillor McClelland.
Thank you again, Chair. When I was reading through this and preparing for the meeting today, when I came to the appendix, I thought, I've seen some of these comments before, so I picked up the report from last year, which was the meeting. It was the meeting on the 15th of March 2018, and that reflected an audit at Hardthorne Road in September 2017. And it's just when I'm looking at the recommendations, so if we take in this report, if we take recommendation number 1 that reflects about writing the case notes, etc. When I look back at the report a year ago, the report actually indicated that the progress was such that we were satisfying an exact replicate comment to recommendation 1. So 1 year ago we were satisfying the report and the recommendation, and now we're finding a year on that we're no longer satisfying that. So that's my first comment. My second comment also, it reflects recommendation 4. And recommendation 4 a year ago is pretty much ad verbatim recommendation number 1. And recommendation number 1 back then said that the point had been addressed and a template had been implemented, and now we find in recommendation 4 that a review of the current review and monitor arrangements has taken place. So what we were saying a year ago, in a couple of instances where we thought progress was being made, and in one case the action was put to bed, we're now finding that that's not the case. I'm just wondering if that could be reflected on, please.
Stephen, do you want to help the member out with this one?
Thanks for the comments. Totally appreciate what you're saying. Clearly, I wasn't around a year ago, but reflecting on that. In terms of recommendation 1 and case notes for staff, what tends to have happened is people record the difficult issues that they're being faced with, and it's back to celebrating success, like you mentioned earlier. We've got to be much better at what we do. Changeover in staff can make a difference, and been some management issues in terms of the management support that's been around in Hardthorne Road, with an individual issue that was there. So that's impacted on some of the progress that would be made. That's similar for recommendation number 4. We've now got a more permanent structure in place for Hardthorne Road and also for Ken Ryan House, because the management's linked between the two. So we are addressing these issues in a live sense. And what I would say is, clearly what's here, when you've got one recommendation from a year ago being rehearsed again, isn't good enough. And I'll certainly address that with the team and make sure that we pick up these points. So when you get the report next year, I guarantee that we will see an improvement. That's really all I can comment on there.
You satisfied with that, Councillor McLaren, for now? Any further questions? No. With that then, are we happy to note the outcome of the scrutiny, and we have considered to some extent the progress being made? Are we happy to go ahead with that? Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the Social Work Scotland Annual Conference and Exhibition, which was on the 13th and 14th of June. Confidence, Commitment, Collaboration, and this is effectively a noting report on the feedback about the Social Work Services Annual Conference 2018 as detailed. Are we happy to note that? Yeah, of course, Councillor McKee.
I found this conference a very interesting conference, and we had excellent speakers there. And somebody spoke about trauma, and I was sitting there wondering what trauma was. And I can assure you, by the time this conference finished and the speakers had finished, I was traumatised for about 2 days after it. Some of the things we learned about what's going on across Scotland are mind-numbing, I can assure you, and how people could adapt to provide the services they do. I think they've got to be highly commended for that. It was an excellent conference. I've been at a number of conferences over in my past life, but I've never attended one like that, and it was very educational. So if somebody's wanting to be traumatised, I'll arrange for you to go to next year's conference. But it was very, very interesting and learned a lot.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Councillor Wood?
Well, it's good to hear from the Vice Chair how good it was, but when I look at the report, it's pretty brief. It doesn't actually tell us as elected members what the content of the conference was, and it'd be really good to get a much more robust feedback as to what took place, and to help to inform us as elected members that weren't present.
My understanding is that following the conference that there is a conference report collated, but that takes a bit of time for it to come through. But equally, we've got access through to the presentations that were made on the day and the reports on the day that are all sort of online. So we certainly could look at whether or not it's possible to give you access to that. I'm not suggesting you'd want to maybe sit through all of it, but there might be bits that you want to sort of have a quick look at, and those that would be more interesting to you might want to look, and that probably gives you more of a flavour, maybe than even sort of seeing the conference report, which sort of just really will go through, this is what happened and this is what this person spoke about. So if we can maybe certainly look at that as to whether we could make that available.
No, I think that would be extremely helpful. It's just that when you look at the imbalance, that you've just got the chair and vice chair, and yet there's 5 officers went along. And I hope that they get a better briefing than what we've got here.
That's a fair point, Councillor Wood. Any other members? Councillor Dempster.
Having been at the conference in the past in my capacity as chair, I think it's a real benefit to staff that they go. The networking opportunities and the learning experience that they get is very valuable. In fact, I often used to say, maybe more important they go than we go. So I have no objection to members of staff going. I think it's useful for them and it's beneficial, and I think that's an important thing.
Are we happy to agree this noted, and also if, with the additional information, if it's available, to be circulated to members, maybe in the form of a link to some of the, because there was quite a rich agenda over the 2 days, and as was touched on by Councillor Dempster, it really was something that for those in the professional sector really benefited from, in terms of, for us it was almost like a a bit overwhelming, I think, for the elected member, because you're being presented with, as Councillor McKee alluded to, so many in-depth studies and stories about the trauma and the actual real-life working of professionals in the field. So it's very much hang on tight and sort of try and learn as much as you can. But yeah, so if we can get that information for members in terms of the presentations that were at the conference, that would be good. And with that, can we, Councillor Maitland, do you want a final word?
Could I just ask, I mean, the conference clearly based its work around the theme of neglect. And I just want to know, it's about what was maybe gleaned and gathered. Are we intervening earlier and earlier? Are we actually getting to deal with younger and younger children and intervening earlier? Is that what is coming through in terms of activities with younger children? I am aware that it's health visitor activity very early on, but I think, as a committee, because we have to pick up what happens later on, I think we probably would like to just get a flavour of whether this neglect issue is actually working in the sense that it is being dealt with as early as possible.
And that's an extremely complicated area, but I will summarise as best I can. There are a number of things that go on here in Dumfries and Galloway in relation to getting it right for every child, and that's aimed at highlighting any issue that a universal service can't deal with for a child, and that's the first trigger around something might be going wrong in the young person's life. And we've therefore got systems to link into more specialist services, either within the universal service or a referral on to something more specialist, such as social work. So that works well. And in Dumfries and Galloway, we've seen appropriate interventions and appropriate referrals. However, we are seeing a significant increase in complex cases coming to social work. From children and families' perspective, from the start of January, we've had around about a 25% increase in referrals and very complex situations coming forward. So that would suggest that at some point in the past, the earlier intervention has been missed because it's quite serious issues that are coming through. But I do believe that with some of the research that we're doing sort of locally and nationally, and discussions at like Social Work Scotland, for example, austerity is having a significant impact on the most disadvantaged group of people who are living in poverty. And when you live in poverty, you've got more adverse childhood events, more alcoholism, more drug problems, more violence, and these things all come up. So we're trying different approaches. You'll hopefully be aware, in terms of the money that came through the poverty funding from yourselves, we've got an intensive family support service, and some members were at a seminar last week where we heard about a different approach to really getting into families at as early a time as we possibly can, but to do things a little bit differently, whereby we're working with people to change the structures and the routines to actually bring them to a better level of social functioning. Sorry for the jargon. I'm a social worker and I'll try not to use too much jargon when I can help it. So we're trying different approaches and we're looking at future models. So yes, we're catching some of these things earlier, but some of it's coming from left field that we weren't aware at quite high levels, and we're experiencing that quite significantly at the moment.
With that grim prognosis, can we accept the recommendations here that we've noted this and then move on? Right. Thank you. We're now on to the Integrated Workforce Plan, Health and Social Care, and we've got James McDowell here to speak to this report should members have any questions. So we've been asked to consider the plan as presented for 2016 to 19. This is a refresh for this year, and we're also to note that this workforce plan will be reviewed on an ongoing basis, with progress being reported to the Integration Joint Board. And also we're going to be hopefully noting that the partnership will develop operational workforce plans which complement the strategic aims of the Integrated Workforce Plan. Is there anything you'd like to add just now, James, or open it up for questions? Councillor Howie. I feel this is maybe out with the scope of this report. I don't know if you're able to add any value to that, James, but is this something you can maybe pick up offline and then raise with the appropriate? Yeah, Heather can come in just now, though.
Yeah, it probably fits with the GP transformational programme that's underway, so we could certainly pick it up from there. Have a quick conversation maybe afterwards. Yeah.
Councillor Murray.
I was just, I have to say that figure 3 gave me a bit of a nasty shock, because it's particularly, I should now be in ill health according to this figure. And this is the sort of attitude that men can expect to spend 22% of their life in ill health and women 23%. Now, what's the definition of ill health in that case? I mean, is this just that somebody has a condition? Because actually, with the working age going up to 66, most people are in ill health according to this before they've even retired.
Is that a comment or a question?
I'm just interested as to what the definition of ill health actually is, because it's a bit unfortunate if we have. I know this is a national figure, that if we have an attitude that people can expect to be in ill health rather than people should have an aspiration to live healthily, even if they have a condition.
I mean, I expect in a way we're looking at the winning lottery tickets because we're all of reasonable health here, I suppose. Well, but I mean, in terms of workforce planning, I don't know if that's something that you just have to. This would be a national demographics and statistics that will be taken into account. But I don't know if you want to maybe qualify that a bit further, James, or if it's
All I can do, I'll get the definition and feed it back to committee, because there'll be some sort of rationale behind it that they work that out on. But it's a national level. But I'll feed it back.
Councillor Dempster.
Aye, and again it's a very, loose application, this question, to the workforce planning. But if you look at 3.1 on page 95, it talks about the ambition to have the right people, the right skills in the right place at the right time, and the vision of a Dumfries and Galloway who would share the job of making our communities the best place to live active, safe and healthy lives by promoting independence, choice and control. I understand Kirkconnell Day Centre's closing in October, and if that's right, I'm learning these things in the public domain, which is absolutely shocking. As an elected member, I think that's wrong. Also, I have serious concerns about the consultation, because I don't believe there's been any, about strategic planning for the void that will occur if that's the place. I understand it's a precursor to all day centres closing, and this is something that this council has resisted for many, many years on the basis that it's important for social interaction, for a remote rural communities to engage and meet. And this Kirkconnell is in the worst deprived area in Dumfries and Galloway, and the only thing we can do for them is shut services I think it's shocking, and I don't know whether that's right or no, but certainly the information I was given from a member of the public last night.
If we could ask Heather to maybe address this one.
I'll try and address it as far as I can. I'm not aware of Kirkconnell Day Centre shutting, and I would need to go and check with our colleagues in health and social care, because that isn't what I understand the plan to be around the day centres. Certainly there's no plan at this stage, as I understand it, for any day centre in that sense to be shut. They're going out to tender for the day centres, as they are at the minute, with a view then, I think, to looking at how we might sort of improve that service redesign and stuff and make some changes in the future. But closures, I'm not aware of, and I'm particularly not aware of Kirkconnell, so I'll certainly go and check that for you, and I can certainly come back to you, hopefully today, if not tomorrow, with some answer on that, because that's not something that I've heard.
I appreciate that, Chair, because it was a member of the committee that came to me last night. They were having an emergency meeting this morning at 10 o'clock and asked me to attend, and I couldn't because I'm here, and apparently they've had correspondence to that effect. So I'd be grateful, Heather, if you could, and if you could email me whatever information you have, please, that would be helpful. And obviously I would presume there'd be some support around this table for to try and ensure that that doesn't happen.
Can I just let Councillor Carruthers in? Is it the same point?
It's the same point. Just over a year ago, I asked for a review, as a member of the Integrated Joint Board, I asked for a review to come forward to that board in regards to day services. Day centres are a part of that. It came, I think it was to the Clinical and Care Governance of the Integrated Joint Board, as far as I'm aware, about 2 months ago. I'm on that committee, but I wasn't at that meeting because I had asked for it to come back to the Integrated Joint Board, which it hasn't. Now, there was certainly implications there for potentially one of the 10 day centres across Dumfries and Galloway. I don't think closure was ever an option, Jim, but I think it's important that there's actually reports, an independent review across all day services across Dumfries and Galloway. In particular, the day centres are, well, they're all focused on, but day centres right in the heart of that. I think it's maybe important that Jim maybe sees a copy of that, and there's a conversation between the Health and Social Care Partnership and the outcomes to that report. The decision was made at the Clinical and Care Governance. It may well end up in front of the Integrated Joint Board anyway. So just on that point, Jim, because I was part of that, asking for that review, but there's never been an intention in any way, shape or form to be closing day centres. They've always been heavily supported by the council, and I get the feeling that Integrated Joint Board has the exact same view. So it would be just interesting to see what comes of that.
That's helpful, Councillor Carruthers, thank you. So on the basis, well, in terms of recommendations for this report, if we're happy to note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3, and with the understanding that Councillor Dempster will get a prompt and informed update from Heather once she's had a chance to chat.
I'm grateful to both Heather and Ian for that, Chair, and I don't think anything needs to be added to the report. I'm happy to take some information offline with that. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor McClelland, I hadn't seen you there.
Yeah, just to add to that recommendation, okay, we're specifically mentioning Kirkconnell there, but is this a precursor to other day centres? Could we just have the whole day centre situation clarified rather than just Kirkconnell?
Yeah, are you happy? Are you happy to sort of include the general position on day centres as far as you can get?
Yes, I'll do that because I have access to the report that is being referred to. So yeah, I can absolutely clarify that, and I'll do that this afternoon.
Councillor Maitland.
Well, I'm just saying, can we concentrate on the health and social care workforce plan? I'm sure it's extremely important, and information must go to members about their local facilities. But this is about a health and care, social care workforce plan, and I think we should concentrate on that.
So, and your gentle steering is welcomed because I feel we're developing a tradition at Social Work Committee of straying into these areas, but no, you're right. So do you have any further questions to ask on the report in front of us, Councillor Maitland? With that then, are we happy to go, oh sorry, Councillor Dougie Campbell.
A couple of questions, if I may, Chair. The picture, certainly in my reading of this report, is quite bleak in terms of recruitment and retention of staff, and I'd be interested to know if we've got any comment on how Brexit impacts on this, and you know, certainly with the number of EU citizens that we have working within health and social care, and also a more specific point, page 106, second last bullet point. There's reference to attracting high calibre workforce and the reluctance on existing staff to apply for promoted posts. Why is that, and what can we do about it? Because it's important that we have the experience developed within the actual structure of the organisation.
James, is that something you can help with?
Yeah, I totally agree with regards to the recruitment and retention. That there's a flavour of that within the report and the difficulties that go with that. And there's some recommendations in there. Even from a sort of council employee point of view, we have theme 5 that's within modernising our council, and within there, we're looking at workforce transition, particularly around about lateral movement of staff. Trying to develop our own staff to take up some of these opportunities, and particularly from a social work side of things. Looking at whether social work assistants, for example, if there's something we can do with social work assistants to allow them to move and develop up through to becoming social workers, and then look at the social work assistant element of it, from the rest of the council, basically, to see if we can get that lateral movement within our organisation. With regards to the Brexit, there are talks going on, obviously, at a local level when we're developing plans, and how that would, not just from a social work side of it, but wider council context, what would be the impact of that, and particularly around about funding, if there's funding available that comes from that element. So that is on the card, and it's on the table and being spoken about. So
I'm sure it'll all become clear soon.
With that then, are we happy to agree the recommendations? Yep. Okay, thank you. Item 9 is for noting, and that's for the Adult Support and Protection Committee that was held on the 13th of March 2018. Are we happy to note that? Yep. Thank you. And item 10 is the Child Protection Committee. Again, are we happy to note that? Thank you. With that, that concludes the business for today. Thank you for your attendance, and a safe onward journey.